Okay, here's another one that's going to discuss, well, a lot of topics, but kind of the major theme on this across this one is again blue-eyed traits. It's something that keeps coming up, and it keeps coming up for a definite reason. We're on Robert Sepper's site, Atlantean Gardens, and looking at some of his stuff I just found here, and I'm like, well, whenever he does his video, which even this one right here, it kind of touches upon it, and some of the other stuff he says down below is in another video, and some of the other is another, but right here it's pretty much all together. I can add something to that. But you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we're looking at a pyramid that's been built in Europe, in an old graveyard. And of course, it looks very pointy and doesn't look like the real pyramids, but it does look like the ones that the Egyptians built up in Meroe that got repurposed and so on. But every stone that's in there is cut to a bevel and an angle to fit into it. And this is very much like the ones that, even by own dating standards, predate the Egyptians ones that are found up in Greece. Although it's been toppled down and cut down, I don't know if you can kind of tell it, but it's a little bit kicked over here. And I want to let you know that everything's laid out here on a square, but that's pointing towards true north. The others aren't quite, but it's squared off. Probably with a plot that goes along with the river here or the pond that's right here next to it. You look at things like this and you'll say, oh, well, you know, this is, of course, a much more modern representation than the ancient pyramids and stuff. And sure it is. But look at the amount of weathering that's on it right now. And then you can look at the weathering of the one that's at Hyrcanopolis I talked about in Greece and stuff, and the weathering of the pyramid. And even though it was covered at one time, when you take those off and look at the amount of weathering, and a lot of people say, well, you know, there's sandstorms and that helps out to it. And okay, well, let's get into that a little bit. Over here we see all these tombstones that are down here. And they all look like they're the same. And they're about the same age, aren't they? Well, no, they're not. If you go up and read off of them, you might find that it's grandpa and da-da-da, and it goes through 3 generations, and this person over here is something else, and a little bit revered in the family, and he had a real big coffin type thing made, but what we call tombstones today look remarkably like stelae of old days. And these stelae were people took stone and they put special writing on them to be remembered forever, written in stone. We use it now to commemorate somebody for long term after their death. But if you look at these, they were pretty much to a shined polish and then had etched words written into them, and you look at them closer and they are all worn off pretty much, and these are only a few hundred years old. Whenever you go to Egypt, you can find places and situations not exactly like this, but like this, and they'll tell you this is all about the same time and made the same way. And you go, okay, isn't it remarkable how little weathering is on these things, though? Well, we're sure of that dating, and oh, this all looks like the same rock and all quarried about the same time. And you go, okay, then why over here are all these eroded like hell in comparison? I realized they could come from the same quarry. In fact, that little mountain range right there that they quarried out of, that's got a lot of stone in it, capable of coming out of it. But why would this set over here be so or more eroded? I could, go. I don't know why I'm going off on this right now, but I could show you it. It would be one of those things where you show you a picture and they tell you the dating and this, that, and the other, and they got it all down, and then you go, well, look at the weathering on this. Okay, first of all, if the weathering that we're looking at right here in front of us at this cemetery is weathered to this point, and I know it rains here more and everything, okay. But the weathering that is shown there on these ones, you're like, wow, so it must have been extremely finely made. like these little perimeters that go around here. If you look at it, it's probably 5 by 5, 6 by 6 beams, almost like giant beams of wood, but they're all made out of granite too. And yeah, some of them are cracked now too. You can see right over here, this one kind of tails off at the top of it because of the ground settling, and eventually even its own weight. It's amazing, these things, even in a modern day, being able to cut this thing out of a slab with a giant saw that's as big as your house pretty much, and cutting through these things, machinery, and then being able to pull this off. Because, you know, you just sag one end off of something a little bit and it'll snap. In fact, you can kind of see a little crack in this one. It looks like the ground got a little belly heavy in the middle of it, and it's cracked right there, but you can tell it was solid at one time. Well, you know, I can show you in Egypt where there's places that are, and other places that are eroded, and if you look at the amount of erosion, you go, well, it must have been made to that quality for it to be eroded as bad as it is. And you go, oh, okay, so, you know, we have a dating and we're trying to go off that, but what people flash right past in that moment is the fact that some of these datings are 4,000 years ago or 2000 BC, and we're edging on Bronze Age technology at all. They try to tell you they did it all by pounding on rocks. Hell, these things will snap if you get a vibration going in the machine that's badass with the diamond cutters. And yet, they made it at one time about this damn good right here, and you're saying that they had this. It doesn't work too well. This is not a debunking of that or a ooh part of anything, but the ooh part that I was talking about a minute ago is you'll see these stelae and these stuffs that they have, and you go, oh, it's about the same date, and you go, unless over here these are much more eroded. So unless there was a ritual where you picked up sand and walked by it and slung it at it like a sandblaster for a long time, there's probably no reason or possible a summation you can come up with a reason that this thing over here is that more eroded. When you go out to an old graveyard, you can see the ones that are new and the older ones, and then, oh, the real old ones. And you can even tell, and it's just a few hundred years. Oh, look, here's one's 18 something, you know, and, well, I know there's more water and weather and everything, but we're talking about the same type of stone, right? So we're lucky that it's at the level that it is. And we're lucky Göbekli Tepe got buried and held in the way that it does, but that was still like sitting in a little you know, of gravel and sand. But there's no way that those two go a corresponding of a similar date. I'll do a video about maybe 2 or 3 of those situations where you go, okay, they all say this is about that age. Everybody agree? Look how old this is that they're saying is the same time in the same spot. And if this is that old and it took this to that to get to this erosion, how much longer is it to get to that level of erosion? This would have to be pre-dynastic. And now we're talking about Chalcolithic or a Copper Age, but they don't, no, they don't, no, they pound on rocks and stuff. Really, pound on rocks. That's how they made the Narmer tablet. Well, you know, it's amazing the technology they had going there with pound on rock. I mean, Fred Flintstone would be proud as hell. Doesn't work out. I'll do a couple of those vids here soon. Who knows? Maybe I'll do a, well, you know that alien box over here? Maybe I'll do a couple of string videos that go along with ideas and concepts that, and let me know down in the comments if you want me to do one of like alien connections, question mark, or I think I've already used that one up, but well, that was on the old site anyhow. So now we're looking at the blue eye in a Greek statue. Studies carried out by scientists from the Institute of Forensic Genetics at the University of Copenhagen have concluded that all blue-eyed people share a common ancestor, someone who lived 6,000 to 10,000 years ago nearby the Black Sea. Now, this is close to the Caucasus area, or the Caucasus Mountain type thing, and it doesn't go with the Bible, and they landed with a boat in 3 little groups. That works in later. I'll talk about that shortly. But what it does go with, and people misname this, misquote this, and misuse this all of the time, and of course for their little talks and agenda. But when somebody says they're related to this person, it can go many generations before that, but it would have been this person in effect. It's what it looks like. Now, how they can do this in a small scale, the way they've done it here, is they look at the genetics and they know how things fall into each other, and it sews in, and due to where it fits along the haplogroup line, the DNA strand itself will tell you what happened before what happened before what happened. And they've already figured out, some of them displace others and da-da-da, but they've got this kind of figured out. And so they're able to use this logistically a little bit and say, you know, this trait that goes on, everybody's related that has blue-eyed trait to one man that lived 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. So it goes back to the Younger Dryas and forward, or into the last ice age. Or perhaps just 4,000 BC. That's 6,000 years ago. Which also sounds very like the biblical number, doesn't it? An Adam and things going on. Well, see, things get ruined about that because there wasn't anybody or anything, and blah, blah, blah. Well, people have taken that whole story out of context, as I've revealed many times over and over. And we all understand that the flood of the Sumerians was a local one, and a lot of people had ones, and it all goes with a folklore that strangely all goes with a similar story from way back when. But I've got a video that talks about light skin genes and light eyes and hair, and it doesn't go with this idea that people try to pull out of this concept that, well, there ain't been no blue-eyed people before 6,000 years ago, so you're Adam guy and that's about it. And well, no. Homo sapiens goes back 315,000 years ago. Cro Magnon goes back, well, 38 or so. There's a questionable 44, I think, but only a partial cranium to where they couldn't just go, yeah. But at the same time, well, we'll look more about Cro Magnon here later, but Cro Magnon had light hair and things too. Oh, they've denoted it. In fact, found it in the genetics. It's 29,000 years ago, basically, 30,000 years ago, effectively. And it hasn't. And we know Neanderthals way back when also seem to have had a red hair and a burgundy type of hair going on. They even thought for a while that maybe how red hair happened, or perhaps common genetics got together and that's how it showed strong in certain people. Well, they'll figure this out to a more point, but because of political correctness, will any of it really truly come out? Or will it be in little piecemeal, like they usually feed to you, like one piece of rice at a time? Somebody said a long time ago that if you were normally working, putting out some energy, if you're eating rice one at a time, in between working, doing your thing, you wouldn't be able to sustain yourself. That's probably just bullshit to not even talk about. Let's continue. Researchers analyzed and compared the unique genetic makeup of the chromosomes in the iris from 155 blue-eyed individuals from diverse regions such as Denmark, Turkey, and Jordan. I believe in the thing that he's stating here that there was more people, but what we're basically talking about is there's blue-eyed people all in these places, so let's look at that. All of the subjects that participated in the study had the exact same genetic mutation in specific chromosomes of the eye, with very little variation on the genes, indicating that the mutation responsible for blue eyes first arose and spread relatively recently. Going back to my other video where it said light skin genes and so on, It said that this happened about 600,000 years ago. It is so archaic sitting in its place that some preemptive to us, whatever, had this in some way. And you think, well, okay, at the time that they came out with this, I believe they only knew that, it was 265,000 years, but it's 315 now, 1,000 years for Homo. So, pardon me, get a drink here. So it goes back 315, and so they want you to believe. So people have taken this out of context and said, oh, well, blue-eyed people and blonde hair and stuff shows up way, way, way late, and none of these people could have had it, and that happens real late, and then Cheddar Man and all this type of thing, and it's like, no, that's not the way it works at all. And geneticists don't want to get set and put on the thing and ask the question directly, because they don't want to be the one that's acting like saying all this stuff where it's not them, it's just the science. But then they'll get a personal attack, and in a modern day that's disgusting. Science can't further itself quickly and get everything out to everybody because everybody's so cuckle freaked. But they say spread relatively recently. I have found in that article, which you can look up, and it talks about light skin genes and stuff going on, and that 60,000 years ago, basically it was a blanket over quotation marks humanity at the time. And you're like, well, humanity, well, there was other people at that time and everything, yeah, but pretty much a blanket over humanity it was. You find that, like the sub-Saharan species with Acellar man only comes out at 4400 BC. It's a relatively recent thing. In fact, this blue-eyed thing that they try to quarantine and put off to 6,000 to 10,000 years ago is saying that this man is related to him. You know, they tell you that there's like 2.5 million people that are related to Genghis Khan because he was kind of prolific. And then, of course, his offspring were prolific. And then who they got with were prolific. And it just, and like, whoa, kind of thing. So they can go back to that, and that's just not too many. I mean, it's like the family reunion that gets huge. If you could just have great granddad there, it would be like a rock concert. But if you go back a few more, you couldn't hold it as one. It would be a city. Let's just continue here. You know where I was going. Geneticists compared mitochondrial DNA from blue-eyed individuals in countries as diverse as Jordan, Denmark, and Turkey, concluding that people with blue eyes had a single common ancestor that lived by the Black Sea around 8,000 years ago, spreading out with agriculture. So here we're looking at people from very diverse places, and you can see this idea for here are people in Afghanistan, which is way over in Asia. Yeah, well, nowadays we say Asian and people think of Orientals. That's Oriental. But they don't want to use that word anymore. And all of a sudden we get confused. Like people don't know anywhere from where Sumeria is all the way across whatever went on. Seems odd to me. It's like, oh, it's just there's a mist and you don't know how it's going. A mumble what? Here's natives of Iran that still have blue eyes and traits, and you would say that looks very much like a Jewish man. You would probably say a lot of these people have that type of trait. But you look at these guys and so on, you get a different looking trait. In fact, in India, even actors and stuff they have out of there, but it's basically northern India fairly much. There's a lot of mixing now, but blue-eyed natives of Pakistan also. So again, we're off there in that Asia type of look. But if you were just to take and shave all of these people, these men, you wouldn't have to shave the women, and put them in a different dress that didn't have a turban, so you couldn't see their accent, if you know what I'm saying. You'd have no problem discerning. Scientists conclude that this blue-eyed family spread out from an area north of the Black Sea following the last ice age. These people were among the Proto-Indo-European Aryans who subsequently spread agriculture into Western Europe and later rode horses into Iran and India, explains Professor Hans Eiberg of the Department of Cellular and Molecular Medicine at the University of Copenhagen. Why do you have geneticists coming out with this? Well, it's deductions they're making now. Archaeologists seem to be afraid to make these connections anymore. We don't need to talk about why. So that happened basically 5600 BC. A lot of people give a roving date right in here, and of course it didn't all happen at once, like poof, like popcorn. But where we're really looking at is an area that contains Göbekli Tepe and things right over to here, and Sanliurfa, ancient Odessa out of the Bible. But see, that's much, much later in the same area. And people in your mentality a lot of times are saying, well, that's this and this is that. And you're like, they're less than like 35 miles apart. But they're more than 3,500 years apart. And you can see that, like I was talking about in a recent vid, that Tocharians used to be here, and all their stuff was here. And then all of a sudden, bam, they're in China with these pyramids going on there, and they were saying, well, this is the same type of people, and they have tartan fabrics and stuff. Tartan fabrics, like the Celts? Yeah, in fact, on the wheel of Proto-Indo-European linguistics, Celtic and Tocharian is real closely related. In fact, Irish and Sanskrit is closely related, but we can't really talk about that too much. It gets a real butthurt problem. But the Sumerians, and of course the pre-dynastic even Egyptians, before, not like they come in later or something. Oh, they happen again and again and again. But also mentioned up here is the Ainu, and that's the original people of Japan. Yeah, but that's for another video. I've got it already tabulated also. Blue eyes are a recessive trait, though, and the gene must be inherited from both parents. Green eyes involve a related but different gene that is recessive to brown but dominant to blue. So basically, you can stop it, but have it as a recessive trait, but get it with another person and have it pop up possibly. And those listening right now, I'm not saying you have to have blue eyes to do it, but does your sister? How about your grandma? How about this? Oh yeah, well you've got it then. You get with a blue-eyed person, and there's an extreme chance you're going to have blue-eyed kids. It'll be way over average, and you might have some hazel or maybe a green-eyed, and who knows? And you're like, where'd that red-headed kid come from? It's a recessive trait both of you also contained. It's neat. It's what brings all the colorfulness of these Caucasians out. Yeah, color. Following the ending of the last ice age, many Europeans inherited this rare gene associated with blue-eyed people that differentiated them from the rest of the human races. Well, that's kind of a way to say it, and almost flippant, if you will, for we've talked about how that really goes down in reality, and movings and migrations, and who Proto-Indo-Europeans are and now, and who fairies were and elves and things like that, and where that mythology comes from and how it blends into the idea. And, Lord of the Rings and all that. So, indeed, it appears that the elite and nobility that organized the earliest known agricultural civilizations all shared this trait, seemingly coming from the same bloodline that these people talk about, from this same dating. And in fact, it actually goes back to being probably one guy. Well, did he have a dad and a granddad? Sure as hell he did. In fact, that genetic trait goes way back before that. We're really can only at this point pin it on Cro Magnon. But that's it. 30,000, we'll just say. So here we can see the statue of Horaha, and it's blue eyes. This is supposed to be the second pharaoh ever, although it was found in a 12th dynasty tomb, and there's a Horaha also named there in reverence of him. But this is an early wood statue, and it goes quite a bit with them. But this is a new part for them, for they have these crystal beveled eyes that are incredible and mimic a human eye. In fact, if we look at all of these across here, they all have blue eyes, but this one, it looks real. And you can tell. And that looks like Eric, this friend of mine. But you can see the same blue-eyed in the very first original and earliest people of many places, and it's kept sacred to them that it has something to do with it. For, of course, Sumer and all of their gods had the eyes, but even Peru, and this beard, and they don't grow beards. And what's that? And a lot of people, including myself, tell you that it makes a connection back to before they even came into the Americas. For if it all went like they said and they migrated in, they must have been over here before. Well, it looks like there was contact even while they were here. And then there's the Wari people and so on that says, oh yeah. And everybody says, oh, the Vikings came this far. And you go, really? Is that the extent of it? How about let's talk about different people before that? We have India and some of their gods, and Buddha himself is shown with blue eyes and happiness. And it's one of the indicators of being a great man. We'll talk about that. But even in Turkey, where Turkey is not modern day Turkey is what we should say, for we're talking about ancient Anatolia, Asia Minor, if you will, and in the same area. And this is like Sanliurfa man that's associated with Göbekli Tepe and then Catalhoyuk and places like that, and the earliest statue of all of men. This isn't the earliest one. This is one that they found, though, and it had blue stones set in for eyes, too. We can actually find in ancient Egypt in the pre-dynastic that they had dolls that were like this, that had these blue inset eyes and lapis lazuli. And somebody said that lapis comes from Sumerian Afghanistan. In fact, all this lapis lazuli they used was coming from there. Diffusionism, the spread of genetics, linguistics, and our culture practices innovations from one community to others. And so this is how that spread came and who brought civilization. Not that they were pretty much still a primitive people, but they didn't quite have it going on yet. And you can understand in these Anuna gods, whenever they would go around and talk to them, they go, okay, I see what you've got going on here, but here's what you do. When the sun goes around and does all this, at certain times the stars are coming up, and that's whenever you take these things that you saved from the last time you ate them, like the pits for avocados, and you bury them in the ground, or seeds, so you don't crush them all up and eat them. You save some back, and then you take that and put it back in the ground again, and then water it. Oh, you just threw our food away. Wait for it, and of course it takes a week or two, and then all of a sudden, boom. Oh, isn't that amazing? But then there's also, when we find whenever that happened, they had already genetically messed with those plants quite a bit. They had already got each plant to individually go boom. It's amazing. So I've done other videos about swastikas in this type of form here, which we all need to just say swastika from the Sanskrit form of it. For it really doesn't go with who everybody does. But after World War II, oh my gosh, but it's in Aztec and in Greek. And we'll find that Greek symbol, and I showed you connections why, but Greeks and their ancient Levite connection with the biblical type people and Canaanites and so on, but Hindis have it, Celts have it too, the Hopi Indians, China, Japan, Islandic people even have it in some cases, and of course in ancient Tibet. If we look at linguistics simply in a spread of Proto-Indo-European languages, we can see that in USA, that before World War II, we, in fact, in Detroit, Michigan Car Company, use this as a symbol. And in fact, there are pictures of mail planes for the U.S. mail that had this symbol on it back when we first started using planes for it and other purposes. But of course, you would make a connection with the German cross of it and what they talked about in Spain, and it always looked like a propeller to me. Propeller going the other way, Greece, but it's the same concept. Italy, which of course looks like dragons connecting to each other. He shows this in Italy, but I believe this was one found by the Basque people, are in that area too, which is Great Pyrenees Mountains and so on. And then India contains exactly this too, but it goes much further. A lot more. We'll look at that a little bit. But in English you say father, but in German you say Vater or Vater. And that's where Darth Vader comes from. See, this is where you get that Pater being father, like Peter, meaning the same type of thing. Oh, it means rock and it means this. Okay. Okay, well, do you see how that works too? But that's not what it means. Padre, Pater, Pater, Pitar, and Sanskrit, all connective. One, you can just pause this and take a look at it, to the connections in linguistic that work, even from a fire god all the way through. Well, Fure and fire sound close together, but fire doesn't sound like Agnes. Well, ignition does, and it has to do with that. It all works that way. But there are other ones that are just extremely connected, like soul, are the names for kings, are gods, and we talked about Got and Dios and Theos and Deus and Divas. Yeah, and we're not talking about who you think we're talking about when we talk about divas. When we look at ancient Egypt, arguably one of the world's oldest known civilizations, we find many blonde and fair-haired mummies. Well, it even goes to the pre-dynastic Ghibelline mummy known as Ginger himself. Since World War II, Western academia is backed and lobbied by political and motivated forces at the United Nations, has pushed for a Marxist-inspired multicultural view of ancient history, which has ignored archaeological evidence in favor of political correctness. Well, actually, that's not really correct in any way, shape, or form. And when we use the term political correctness, it's gotten way out of hand. Not that you would say something in a more leftist or rightist way. I mean, it's way past that now. However well-intentioned this false perspective have cast much confusion over human origins and who we are and how we came to be. So here we find Thuya and Yuya, and a lot of people have said, oh, this has got to be Joseph out of the Bible, and this, that, and the other, and da-da-da, and that's the great-grandparents of King Tut, by the way. And Hatshepsut, she's the smiling mummy in her auburn type of hair. In fact, all of these are Caucasian-haired, but they said, well, they were blonde or this, that, and the other. Well, they said, oh, that happened from the natron process. And we go, well, how come this one's black-haired then, and this, that, and the other? See, the oddity is that we find red and blondes, and it does it. So they took some of everybody's kind of hair, even black people, old people stuff, and put it in natron, and it didn't change one single shade. And they go, no, doesn't change it at all. That's the truth of it. What does do, though, is generally takes their skin and turns it like beef jerky, dark as hell. But then also they shellac them with stuff, and I recently did a video about it, but they cover them with a tar resin that, even though it's got a derivative like oil, like bitumen in it, it is also got conifer tree resin from up in Europe. And they were supposedly figuring out exactly which one in which form from an area. I haven't heard since on it. But worse than that, you can see, or better than that, you can see the earliest dynasties had those crystal blue eyes that are the anomaly, perfectly made. And in doing so, they show you that the earliest dynastic Egyptians all had these blue eyes. In fact, even Nefertiti, they were freaked out on her recreation. But she has one eye left. It's blue. Here's Mitri. Here's again Horaha, but it's not as good. See, it's weird too that their eyes are kind of blue-gray, but if you get in the right angle, then they're all blue. It's like it's staring at you. I've got some pretty good up-close pictures and a series of videos where I wouldn't shut up and kept putting it in each one, because there was always that thread connecting back to it. Another one of the oldest documented civilizations, in fact, people realize now that it actually goes back before Egypt, basically, even though you talk about a pre-dynastic and Ubaids and all these different civilizations, that they go back for it. In fact, people have figured out that a lot of the pre-dynastic comeuppance that happened in Egypt happened from a conflagration of these people. Well, the Fertile Crescent was quite connected. So, one of those earliest documented civilizations now, because now we go back and we found, oh, there's all this stuff going on, and then there's Göbekli Tepe, and people are trying to deny that they had any agriculture, but just guys roaming around hunting got together and built this giant complex and kept it going somehow. And what it represents, it really has put a shoe in between the trying of shutting of the door of the reality of the way things went. So the Sumerians, having been credited with the first writing, they had schools, they had courts, and they had a two-part system too, and a group, and it was, a round table type of concept. Many other firsts were the ancient Sumerians of Mesopotamia. This is between the Tigris and Euphrates. They called their land Eden, and this is where the biblical concept comes from. The ancient Sumerians thought that blue eyes were a sign of the gods. In fact, that's repeated over and over again in their nature, and they talk about On having blue eyes and so on, describing the sky along with them and things like that. Oddly, I saw something recently where they said that people couldn't describe the color blue, apparently because some people didn't have a name for it, and they gave it odd names, and that they couldn't discern between colors. And you look at Phoenician purple and its variations from a royal blue to all the way to a magenta. Well, there's a lot of colors that we have names for in between there, but in elder days, there wasn't really much of a name for that. But then there are more purple flowers and things than there are blue. There's only blue in certain things, certain peacock eyes and feathers, just a few birds. I used to do fish professionally. There's only a few blue fish. Corals, the live growing corals. There's only a few corals that have a little bit of aqua and blue in them. It's kind of a rare color, and you think, well, the sky's so blue, why isn't everything blue and everything? Well, perhaps when things are trying to stand out somewhat and you're in the ocean and everything is that blue color, it would be a color of going away. Like if you use something red, like if I took this pack of cigarettes that's red colored, if you can even see it, and I go down about 40, 50, 60 foot, all of a sudden it just turns into grayish black. It no longer gives off the color red because there's no more red making it down and back, and to your eyes off the object anymore. Anyhow, regardless, we're going to go to part 2 on this. Hopefully not. Maybe. We'll see. Let's go. So this was a sign of the gods. In fact, well, all the gods there had them on there. Buddha's got blue-eyed. All these gods, these other people denote them. Yeah, and so definitely it has to do with that. But also they're priest kings and so on. And so there was these blue-eyed gods, and then they passed along a kingship to these early priests that you're seeing pictures of here, and they had blue eyes. And they always talked about demigods and all this type of situation. And what's this? Well, there's also that situation where in the Bible it talks about, oh no, you won't die if you do eat from the special magic tree. It'll make you as the gods of this earth. People front right past that, just like they do the talking snake and a woman growing from the rib, or even a magic tree. But that's got other connotations to do with it too. These blue-eyed statues pictured below are of Sumerians from the earlier 3rd millennium BC. They are the Sumerians. The Sumerians, they certainly belong among the same racial division of mankind as the nations of Europe. They are the scions of the Caucasian stock. This is said by Arthur Keith, quoted in excavations back in 1927 when they started finding these statues, the phenotypes, everything that went along with it. And they made connections. He was like, hey, well, like Egypt, they got these things and this, that, and the other, da-da-da. And it's yeah, that's who they are, definitely. Gautama Buddha's physical body is traditionally regarded as having the 32 characteristics of a great man. These 32 characteristics are described throughout the Pali Canon and are also regarded as being present in the Cakravartin kings as well. Number 29 on this ancient list is that eyes are deep blue. Why would there be all these edicts of what would be? You would act this way, you would do that, you would do this, you would do that. I can understand all things like that. Then all of a sudden, flashing here in the list, they say you would have deep blue eyes and you would carry these characteristics. Here we're seeing the seashell and then that sacred swirl that's into it and sacred geometry that we had talked about before. But you can see in these depictions, they all have these blue eyes and this conspicuous dip right above the eye, dip. It's holding above the eyelid. All blue. 2,000 years ago, a mysterious and little-known civilization with blue-eyed elite ruled the northern coast of Peru. Its people were called the Moche. Conspicuously, Moche is what Moses' name, working out of ancient Hebrew. I think this is going to go to part 2. Whenever it does, it's in your top left-hand corner. They built huge pyramids that still dominate the surrounding countryside, some well over 100 feet tall. Archaeologists working at Peru's Huaca Pucllana ruins recently pulled a blue-eyed mummy from the ancient tomb thought to be the ancient Wari culture, or the cloud people perhaps, that flourished before the Incas, piercing blue eyes undimmed by the passing of 1,300 years. This is the Lady of the Mask, a mummy with striking blue eyes whose discovery could reveal the secrets of a lost culture at the Huaca Pucllana Pyramid located in Lima, Peru. It is the first time a tomb from the region's Wari culture has been discovered intact and not tampered with, and gives historians the chance to learn about the ancient pre-Incan civilizations. And so this predates the Incas, 700 to 1,000 years here AD, and the Wari kingdom was pretty huge here over Peru. Peru is this area of South America, right? And again, we have those polished blue lapis lazuli looking type discs that are done in there, and from a certain angle, this kind of looks like my grandma. It has aquiline nose and stuff goes on with it. But there are even blonde curls that are sticking out still. And they pulled this intact out in one piece, put like tissue paper around it and stuff. I've got another video where they show them literally excavating it and pulling it out. The Lord of Saipan's tomb, pictured below, here on the right, is held by some archaeologists to be one of the most important archaeological discoveries in this region of the world in the last 30 years, as the main tomb was found intact and untouched by thieves. By doing so, it wasn't ransacked and everything out of it. And one of the things they found was the Moche ruler, whose golden-eyed mask, now called the Joy of Saipan, was found in his grave. And it said that he had blue eyes. I don't think they've done genetics to it, but they also killed a few people to go with him in the afterlife as servants. Certainly looks like that. It doesn't look like they died recently and they excavated him back and put him in here. It looks like it went together like that. But another, he was called Viracocha by the Incas, Kulkulkan by the Mayas, Quetzalcoatl by the Aztecs, Cucumatz in Central America, Votan in Palenque, and Zamna in Izamal. And in some cases, his men were described as being tall, bearded, with white skin and beautiful emerald blue eyes. We're going to go to part 2. It's in your top left-hand corner, and we'll start right there.